Welcome back to the Elemental series of instructional videos. In this video we're going to look at the brick in itself, how it's made and its just basic characteristics. Now there are many different types of brick that you can buy, and not all of them are a consistent size. Now I guess the two dominant types of brick on the market of what you could call an extruded, or what they often call a wire cut brick. They're the sort of by far the most common types of brick that you'll see in most contemporary construction. Or there's a pressed brick. That's a more traditional brick. It's a little bit more expensive to produce, but it does tend to be a lot crisper and give sort of much more sharper brickwork. It's a much more higher quality brick. Now bricks do come in different shapes and sizes, so the dimensions that you see here are of a standard brick, but this is by no means a universal standard. You're getting bricks now that are more I guess metrically focused, some which are much thinner. There seems to be a focus on a more biscuit type of brick, but for most part the standard brick is 230 millimeters long, 76 millimeters high and 110 millimeters wide. When it's laid properly, typically the mortar bed, the horizontal, is 10 millimeters thick, and the perpen, these are the vertical joints, are typically 10 millimeters as well. Now I guess the two different types of processes of making brick is basically it comes from a natural material, shales and clay, and it's either produced in a sort of, I guess, a thrown way, which is a pressed or even or sort of a wetter sort of sandstock brick, or the faster, I guess, more economic way is to push it through a die, extrude sort of billets of clay and then cut them with a wire to make the brick. These are both kind of then fired in pretty much the same way, so that the clay vitrifies and makes it more water impermeable. So we're just going to quickly go through the different production types, just to give you an insight on how the bricks are made. Now you can see here, this is the brick plant out at PGH at Oxley. Now just looks like this tractor's pushing dirt around, which in some senses it is, but what it's doing, it's blending different shales and clays that PGH source from different sites all around Queensland. Now surprisingly, because the brick pits were positioned at Oxley, where there was a lot of natural clays, but most of that resource is being exhausted, so what they actually end up having to do is import a lot of the resource. A lot of it comes from major construction sites, so a lot of the spoil from the tunnels and from large excavations. There are people in the industry who are always searching for new sources of material, and often brick manufacturers will excavate or be part of the construction, early construction process, to recover the material which they will then use to make their bricks out of. So different types of clays and shales will give you different colours of bricks, and blending these, which is a very technical sort of thing, although done by a large truck, will also give you different variations in colour. A lot of the waste brick, these are the bricks that don't meet standard, that are vitrified or unvitrified. They've sort of been rejected either before or after they've gone in the kiln. These are saved as well, and they tend to get crushed up again by the heavy machinery working on the site, and they eventually become part of the blend that is mixed by these large tractors and kept under cover and dry until it's ready to be crushed. And this is the sort of where the fine blend happens, so that the shales and the clays are mixed together to give a uniform appearance. And then a little bit of water. It's actually not a great deal of proportion of water, probably no more than it's less than 20%. So it results in a sticky clay, but not a wet clay. And this then is pushed through a die, and you can see the sort of billet of clay being forced out under pressure. and in this instance there's a roller at the other side with a pattern embossed on it, and this gives a patterning to the surface of the brick. And different dies which they put at the end of the extruder will give you different sizes of bricks. It goes through the process where you can see on the right hand side the bricks coming through a whole series of wire cuts. So as it goes through the billet, push through the wire, and then it just goes through an automated system where it is stacked onto these trucks, and they are put into a tunnel kiln. So there's a sort of continual sort of progression of these trucks going in, which are all manipulated in an automated fashion. There's no one pushing them, or there's no one having to drive them into position. And then they spend a bit of time preheating or drying out, and probably a period of a day or so where they're actually fired so that they become vitrified. In most contemporary or modern kilns this is done through gas firing, although the kilns themselves are still quite, they're using quite an older design. So although they're trying to increase the efficiency through the use of gas and so on, it's still a fairly traditional process of making bricks. You can see the large ductwork coming from over the top of that. That's as much heat recovery that they're trying to get out of the waste heat of the kiln, and then that flows back into earlier stages of the kiln to help dry the bricks. And the heat from the brick is actually very, very hot. I think it's around about more than 1,000 degrees. However, these plugs that are over the top are removed, and the gas firing is moved manually along the tunnel. So these are open and shut all the time. Now, the colour of the bricks in this instance, although the clays are going in as a grey colour, following the vitrification process, the actual final colour emerges, and you can see here's a sort of a dark browny sandstock, and you can see the different batches of bricks that are going through, and as the firing goes through as well, you do still get variations in colour. Now, often if you get if they're outside the quality control of the standard colour, those bricks will be called seconds or commons. They are still structurally very good. They don't have the colour that the customer wants, and they're usually used in areas where you can't see them as dividing walls, or somewhere that there's going to be render over the top, and they're sold more cheaply than a standard brick. And you can see here the process is fully automated. They know where the trucks are at any time, what clay they've got, what colour, what batches are coming through. So it's a very highly automated and not very labour intensive at all, down to even where it's being palletised by heavy robots and lifters and so on. Now, a lot of the production for PGH in any case of bricks for wire cut or standard brickwork is coming out of Brisbane. A lot of the specialist product is coming out of Sydney, the dry pressed, also some extruded and some stand stock as well. The process is very similar. They're gathering shales and different colours of shales from different parts of New South Wales, storing them, keeping them dry, blending them, and you can see here again the waste bricks, and in this case in a dry press there's a required amount of pre-vitrified clay that's needed in order to keep them bound up and to achieve the sort of strength that you need. Again, they go through a primary crushing process, taken up into the main work area itself, which it's then finally blended and then taken into these machines, which are a whole series of presses that are just pushing sort of clay into a die. Now, the amount of water used in dry pressing is very small indeed. It's around about sort of 10%. So it's a very stiff and dry mixture, and you can see here the bricks are coming out. Because they're not coming out in large billets and being wire cut, the amount of throughput of the out of the presses is obviously much lower than a wire cut, but using automation, again, it's able to sort of keep up or speed up the process as much as possible. Now, the automation then stacks them, they then parked, and because there's not such a demand for the dry press, the kiln is a lot smaller. It's not a big tunnel kiln, but it lives in here for approximately a week, pre-drying and then firing as well. Now, a different type of brick which uses a much wetter mixture is also done. It's what they call, it's more of a trade name, a sandstock. It's, I guess, the more rustic types of bricks that you see around, and they're more of a wet press brick, so much higher proportion of water. You can see here the brick and a dosing of sawdust is put into the molds. It sort of splashes through these rollers and then is scraped off, the excess is scraped off the top, and that excess goes back into the production and feeds back into the cycle. These then sort of pre-cured so that they dry off a bit, and then through an automated process they are then fed through a system, stacked, fired, same sort of traditional tunnel kiln, and in this instance hand sorted and then dispatched. These particular bricks were going to go to Japan because they have quite a large core through the middle of it, for reinforcing for earthquake zones. Now, the final one that we're going to look at is glazed bricks. Now, these give a lot of aesthetic potential in terms of colour and also durability. And basically what it is a standard extruded brick that goes through a second process where a slip glaze is put on and it's refired to vitrify the outer colouring. So these bricks, strangely enough, although that the glazing production is in Sydney, the bricks are being shipped up from Brisbane because they're just standard wire cut bricks. Very simple process, and this is the whole production line. So colour comes in through the mixer that you can see in the foreground, it's sprayed on, and then they just get refired in a very small kiln. So hopefully this short video has given you some, I guess, appreciation of the construction of brick, gives you sort of a sense of what the brickness of the material is. Hope you enjoyed it, and you'll engage with the other videos that will follow.